Yo, what up, this LL Cool J.
Hey, y'all, this is Alicia Keys.
Your variety hits. This is 87.1 Caroline Radio.
You're listening to 87.1 Caroline Radio, KCGN Bakersfield, your home for all your variety hits, just like Aaron's Opinion and the Aaron's Opinion podcast. Thank you for having me on your station today. I greatly appreciate it. And to all of our listeners of Aaron's Opinion, welcome back, listener. How are you? We're glad you're doing well. Glad you had a good week. Tonight I have a very, very exciting guest with me by the name of Nikita Griffin. She's studying psychology at Otterbein University in Ohio in the United States. I wanted to get into a conversation about, why it's important for blind people to think critically about their major and think about why they're studying certain things. So Nikita, tell our listeners about your interest in psychology and really what you would like your impact to be in this field. Go ahead.
Okay, so when I started at Otterbein University, I started in 2015, and originally I was a Spanish major, and after 3 years of studying Spanish, I wasn't where I needed to be fluently. So I decided, since my minor was psychology, to major in psychology. And I really liked the field. I took a lot of classes beforehand, and I took a class called developmental psychopathology, and I think that's what really kind of got me into psychology. The class was just about the developmental disorders of young children, and that's the population that I like to work with. And so that class just kind of threw me right into the field, and I joined the major in 2018, and I am officially graduating in 2 weeks from Otterbein. And next year around August, I hope to be at Ohio State University getting my master's in social work or clinical mental health. What I like to do once all that's complete and the licensing is taken care of is I want to work with children who suffer from mental disorders like bipolar disorder, depression, and also those with disabilities, so autism, communication disorders, blindness. And I think I want the population age to be from 5 years old to 11 years old. I think that's, yeah.
Great. I think that's great. I think that's great. I think it's really, really, really important to provide good, mental health care, because so many people in our country struggle with the issue of mental health. And I find it to be quite concerning that a country as strong and successful as the United States has so many problems as it relates to the treatment and the acquisition of appropriate care. So I greatly appreciate you studying this field, and I really think that this will immensely help many children. It's really important for children to be in a good, mental, frame of mind and things like that. So since most of our listeners are blind, how would you help blind children? And tell me about your interests in blind children and helping them. By the way, I think we found each other on a particular group on Facebook for other blind and visually impaired people, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So tell our listeners more about your interest in helping blind children.
I kind of feel like there isn't really an outlet for children in general to safely have a conversation, like with their parents or peers or even teachers. And the question of being judged definitely might come up for a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old child. But also there are, with the younger generation, 5 to 9, probably feeling misunderstood for any number of reasons. And I feel like having a safe space to go, having an ally as someone who you can go to and talk to about your problems, and somewhere where you can feel safe to confide information. I feel like that'll be very helpful for kids in that age bracket, even for a 4-year-old who, just wants some free time, or who just wants some time to just have a conversation and, have some freedom. I feel like that will help a lot of children feel safe, feel comfortable with talking to someone new. And especially for the blind, I feel like having an psychologist who is also blind will also make them feel more comfortable.
It may. My feedback about that is that are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. Oh, okay. We had a slight breakup there. Yeah, it's lagging a little bit. Yeah. I think you're really onto something really interesting here. So let's say that parents bring in their blind son who is a 10 or 11 years old, and they say that we're here with our son Andrew, and Andrew feels very left out, and he feels like he's being judged. I do want to talk more about the issue of judgment, because I feel personally, with all the traveling that I have done around the world, I do feel that America can be and might be a very judgmental society from time to time. And you may agree with me or disagree with me. That is fine. But I do think that our country is, as a whole, very, very judgmental, especially towards, blind people. So, really, what advice would you have for a child? Because it's kind of tricky. It's kind of hard to explain these complex social issues to children, I think.
I would have to agree. Advice. I think I would have to, obviously, like, get some rapport, get to know the child, kind of figure out where in their life are they being judged. And I think my best advice would be, I know it's easier said than done, but not to really focus on what people are saying, as long as you believe in yourself. That's all that matters. And then also, encourage them that as a psychologist, like, I'm here. So if you need anything, have your parents call. Um, so that's just some quick advice. Over time, I would help them probably with self-esteem, believing, like I said, believing in themselves and uh, things of that nature. Um, yeah.
Well, really, really good. Yeah, I think that most or many psychologists do not take on clients who are children, who are young people. So I think that this could be, a really interesting and a really rewarding endeavor, and something really valuable for blind people. Um, you also mentioned that you might be interested in social work. So, I mean, obviously, I know what social work is, but can you tell our other blind listeners, if maybe they are not familiar with it, can you tell them what is social work and what you plan on doing there if you end up going the social work route?
Well, the degree, the master's in social work, will allow me to counsel children. So um, that will, allow me to get licensed and to have the licensure to counsel and treat um, children with mental health disorders. Um, I think being a social worker, helping children um, in certain family situations is also a good little career to go into, because I feel like you could be a lifesaver for children who are in abusive situations or just situations that aren't good for a child. So you could become like their, savior, um, and you can help them out. And I feel like that's really good for things of that nature. And they can have someone to call on when they're in danger if they need you. So that is, I feel like that's rewarding in its own way.
Without doubt. Sure. Um, may I ask how did you become originally? How did you become so interested in this field of psychology? So being a psychologist, being a social worker, helping people. Um, Perhaps I would ask kind of a personal question, but my viewers would appreciate it in a sense. Did you maybe, and obviously you do not need to answer, but did you perhaps have an experience maybe when you were younger where for some reason in general you uh, encountered a psychologist or encountered a social worker? Oftentimes, because oftentimes people who get into the field of psychology or social work get into it because they experience something as a younger person.
Well, I went to the blind school here in Ohio,
Okay.
and I know, like, there were a few people at the school who had autism, and I didn't know, really what autism was. Like, I hadn't read about it. I hadn't like seen a definition of it, so I didn't really understand. And there were a lot of things about autism and the people that I was surrounded by that I didn't get. So that was one reason. But my siblings both suffer from mental disorders, and that is something that I've always been curious about, like why and how does the medication help them. And so when I came to Otterbein and started looking through the classes, I chose the Intro to Psychology class, and it was actually with one of my he became one of my favorite professors. And so that Intro to Psychology was helpful. And then I decided to continue on and take more classes, um, ones that were more interesting. And at some point, I think it was like 2 years ago, I took a
Right.
psychotherapy class, and that class really was like, okay, I want to do this. And we learned about all the different techniques and types of psychology, and cognitive behavioral therapy was the one that interested me the most. So yeah, those classes really opened my eyes. And once I declared the major, I was super happy about that. So
Well, I'm really glad. So, for those of you who are listening to Aaron's opinion on Caroline Radio for the first time, you probably have no idea who I am, which is totally fine because I can tell you. You're doing a great job. Please let me say a couple things to introduce myself. That basically my name is Aaron Richmond, the host of Aaron's Opinion podcast. I live in an undisclosed location somewhere in the world for personal reasons. I cannot give out much more information than that, but I will tell you that I studied international relations in university, and although that sounds like an interesting major, in writing on paper, I must tell you that I wished that I had studied education, or really, I wish that I had studied broadcasting because I love my podcast. I love being a podcaster. So I wish that I had studied something more close to what I'm actually doing now. But of course, life isn't that easy. Things do not work out that way. Um, so one of my But now, by the way, have you been following Aaron's opinion? Have you been following my podcasts and listening?